The quiet night echoed through the deserted corridors as he passed the nurse's station. Liz, a petite, dark-haired woman who often worked the night shift, smiled at him and said, "Merry Christmas, Officer Belker." He glanced at his watch and realized it was already midnight. Christmas Eve. "Merry Christmas, Liz," he said as he passed her and entered the familiar doorway, not giving her a chance to say anything else or offer her condolences. He leaned down and kissed the sleeping white princess who was trapped in a cage of tubes, cables, and wires that pierced every part of her body and connected her to the machines that beeped, gurgled, and hummed next to her hospital bed. "Hello, Marcy," he said quietly, as he always did when he came in after his shift. He pulled a chair up to her bed, turned it around, sat down opposite her, and took one of her small, cold, motionless hands in his. Unlike every other night during the 8 months of vigil, on this night he took his 10-shot Glock police pistol out of the desk drawer and placed it on the bed next to her right hand. Turning more toward himself than toward her, he said, "I have to do this now, my dear. Later I won't have the courage. It has to be done tonight." Then, as always, he told her about the events of the day. "This morning, I killed 2 people. That is, yesterday morning. I killed the first 2 men on Christmas Eve." He parked in a dark driveway behind an abandoned Shell gas station across the street, on the corner a block away from the Beamdu's Barnett Bank. It was 2 a.m., and the temperature on the sign in front of the bank had dropped to 37 degrees. The sergeant told him, "George, stay home." But he couldn't stay in the warm, cozy apartment that he and Marcy called home. He couldn't sleep there, ever again. Because she was there with him just as she had been before the strange medical incident took her away from him. Instead, he waited for the night depositor, as the police had nicknamed him, to visit the bank, as he had done 3 times in the past 2 months. The deposit collector's motive was deceptively simple. After the bank closed, he would tape an open plastic bag to the inside of a bank-safe deposit box so that unsuspecting depositors would leave their money in it. Before the bank opened, he would take the bag containing thousands of dollars in cash. Due to the bank's location and the fact that retailers deposited large amounts of cash, he risked that a depositor might go to the Beamdu's bank, and his gamble paid off. A late-model Chevrolet pulled into the parking lot. The driver got out of the car and walked over to the storage room, which was decorated with Christmas wreaths and ornaments. The driver climbed into the storage room and pulled out a plastic bag. "Bingo," he said quietly to himself, and quietly turned on the ignition, picking up the microphone and tuning it to a conversation. "This is Unit 37, he said, realizing that communications personnel knew his location. "I see the night depositor. Request backup." A battered and dusty red Mustang sped across the parking lot, cutting off the depositor from his car. 2 men jumped out of the Mustang with revolvers and a shotgun in their hands and pointed them at the depositor, who raised his hands and dropped the bag of money. He heard the depositor beg them to take the money and heard the gangsters laugh as they roughly forced him to his knees on the asphalt. A wanted notice from Atlanta reported that the pair of gangsters, who had been targeting convenience stores and other nighttime establishments, might be headed for Jacksonville. In Atlanta and Charleston, they had executed their victims in cold blood. "Police, stop!" The bandit who had held a revolver to Vkladchik's head was the first to turn and raise his gun to fire. A hail of bullets from a Glock knocked the shooter onto the hood of the Mustang. The bandit with the sawed-off shotgun in his hand said something, but he couldn't hear it over the roaring in his ears. Belker's body seemed to act on its own as he riddled the large man, firing the shotgun with bullets. Something pricked his face, and he wiped away the blood. When it was over, he asked the depositor, who was trembling as he clung to the ground, "Are you okay?" The slightly beaten blonde nodded affirmatively. The bandit with the revolver was dead. The bullet had gone through his heart. The large man fell on his side. Belker turned the large man over and started to check his pulse on his neck. Suddenly, he grabbed Belker's hand with his meaty paw. Belker flinched, but didn't pull his hand away. The large man couldn't speak. The blood gushing from his mouth indicated that the bullet had gone through his lung. He was drowning in his own blood. He wanted to say something, but what could he say to a dying man he had just killed? He held the large man's hand as he tried to breathe, rhythmically tightening and loosening his grip while the song Jingle Bell Rock played on the Mustang's radio. The large man quietly let go of life and loosened his grip, his heavy, sweaty hand falling limp. Belker was kneeling next to the dead man when he heard Vikladchik jump to his feet and run to his car. He should have stopped, should have fired a warning shot, but he couldn't let go of the dead man's hand. He was still holding it, tears streaming down his face when the first units arrived. "That's why I didn't come this morning, Marcy. I was at Internal Affairs investigating the shooting, and I was on my way to the university to have the buckshot removed from my face and shoulder. The sheriff came to talk to me. He said no one was blaming me for letting contributor go. Shock and reaction to the shooting. But they won't let me back on the street. I can't blame them. I couldn't control myself anymore." Belker leaned back in the hard-backed chair that, along with a simple metal table, was in every interrogation room in every police station in the world. Chris Coleman leaned forward and rested his elbows on the table in front of him. Harry Manson, another witch from OVR, leaned his awkward body against the wall of the room and chewed on a toothpick. "I know we've discussed this dozens of times, but here's what I really don't understand, Belker. It's Christmas Eve. You're tired. Your wife is in a coma in the hospital. You could be with her. Everyone says you're a devoted husband. Instead, you're here, out in the cold, on an unauthorized stakeout. On a whim? Why?" Belker rubbed his eyes. It felt like sand had dried on his eyelids. He thought he smelled something unpleasant. He believed he had showered yesterday, but the days were starting to blur together. "I already explained everything, Coleman. I couldn't go back to our apartment. I couldn't sleep there. It's not right. Now I sleep in my car, and I spend my free time with Marcy. But sometimes I have to leave. I couldn't. I've been following reports of the depository's attacks on banks, and I just had a feeling he might attack one of the banks in the Beimedoa area. It's a big shopping district with lots of department stores, so there should be a lot of commercial deposits there. I took a chance that he might attack that bank." "It worked," said Manson, who had been silent until then. For the past 5 hours, since Belker had finally finished all the paperwork related to the 2 police killings and the successful bank robbery, Coleman had done most of the talking. He had drunk at least half a dozen cups of coffee, but he was still struggling to keep his eyes open. "You were there, all alone, and you caught him, and he got away. Considering what they told us at the bank, it could be up to $100,000. That's a good paycheck," added Coleman. He looked Belker in the eyes. Belker stared back at him, unblinking. "You have a good reputation. Until this morning you hadn't killed anyone, but you've been in shootouts, and last year you sent that guy to the hospital. You don't seem like a rookie, and yet you stood there and watched the depositor drive away with his prize. That's strange." Finally, Belker stared at the table. He couldn't explain it to the bounty hunter because he couldn't explain it to himself. "I don't know why. I've been asking myself why since this morning. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't move." "Why are you still on the street, Belker?" "What else could I do?" "You could have gone to the administrator. There's work you could find. Work that wouldn't put you in a difficult position. Where else could I let a guy walk away with $100,000 in the bank? Right?" "Yes." "Has anyone you know ever been in the hospital, Coleman? Anyone seriously ill, in the hospital for a long time? Have you ever had to sit and wait, doing nothing, just hoping, hour after hour? I need to get off the streets, keep myself busy, not sit at a table thinking." Coleman fell silent. Then he concluded, "No, I've never had anyone in the hospital. Not even my wife. And that's the only reason we're not all over you. This morning, you caught two bad guys. You got lucky. But you let a thief get away with $100,000. In most departments I know that wouldn't get you any credit. He couldn't answer. He picked up the plastic cup and took a sip of coffee. The coffee was cold and bitter. The door to the interrogation room opened. A short, fat, sloppy man with light brown thinning hair and an indifferent expression on his face, dressed in a sweater and brown pants, entered. He nodded to the two detectives from the OVR, and Coleman stood up. Both men followed him out into the street. Belker recognized him. He was simply surprised to see him at the police station on Christmas Eve. Belker forced himself to take another sip of cold, bitter coffee to swallow something. 10 minutes later, the door opened again, and a disheveled young man entered the room. He looked at Belker, then sat down opposite him. "Nothing personal, Officer Belker. I know, Mr. Maitland. The guys at the OVR don't trust their own mothers. It's a professional risk. A thief walks away with $100,000 you could have taken from him, and the first thing that comes to mind is that you made a deal with him, that you took a bribe. I didn't do that. I know. I believe you. We, our department, and the OVR have gone over everything with a fine-tooth comb. Everything you've told us checks out. The first officers on the scene told us you were in shock. I doubt many people are good enough actors to fool a bunch of street cops. You have shotgun wounds on your face and shoulder. If the guy with the .45 had been a little closer or had better aim, you wouldn't be sitting here right now." Maitland stared intently into his eyes, and Belker had to fight the feeling that he was looking into his soul. He was just doing his job well. This was a man who had done most of the hard work in the state prosecutor's office for several years, and Belker was used to seeing him at crime scenes. And if you were corrupt, you would have raised a lot more than $250,000 to bring this British doctor here to see if he could help your wife. Yes, I knew something about your situation, but today I did some thorough research. It's $1 million, right? $1 million. That's how much this experimental treatment and the services of this team of doctors cost. Yes, $1 million. That's all. That's a lot of money, but a dirty cop could get it. $1 million is beyond the moon, Mr. Maitland. If I believed it would give Marcy a chance, I'd be the dirtiest cop in the world. But I still couldn't get $1 million. And I couldn't look her in the eye if I saved her that way. She would hate me. But I would do it anyway. Better she lives and hates me than the way she is now. But it won't work. A tall, dark-haired man with a face covered in teenage acne, dressed in a Jacksonville sheriff's uniform, entered the room, exchanged glances with Maitland, then looked at Belker. "How's it going, officer?" "Fine, sir." Sheriff Gerald Knight glanced back at Maitland with an unspoken question. Maitland stared at Belker, but spoke to the sheriff. "It was a clean shot, Sheriff. I'll make sure all the paperwork is done and signed. Cut the charade. Let Belker go, okay?" Knight looked at him, then walked over and stood next to Belker, who craned his neck. Knight was a tall man. "You know I couldn't let you go back there, right?" I kind of believed you would." Knight put his hand on Belker's shoulder. "You're a good cop and a good man, Belker. You did the right thing killing those two murderers. And I still see the first person I ever killed in my dreams. And that was 20 years ago. It's harder than they make it look in the movies. But, you can't leave cops out there on their own. If someone else had sponsored you, you'd be lying on the pavement right now. Forget about the money they gave you. You could have killed other cops or civilians. I couldn't take that risk." "I understand." Knight shook his head slightly. "I know the foundation helped you raise money, but I can ask them to work even harder on this. Remember, as long as she's alive, there's hope." Belker looked at the rough surface of the metal interrogation table and said, "She doesn't have much time left. They're keeping her going, but the doctors say her condition is unstable. She's slowly fading away, shutting down. She has months left, maybe weeks, not years. Soon it won't matter if we bring Walensky here or not. It'll be too late. He's not a miracle worker. He can't bring the dead back to life. Finally, Knight reached out and put his hand on Belker's shoulder. I'm very sorry. I'll see what we can do to help. When this is over, get out of here. Take a few days off, a week, to collect your thoughts before you go back to work. He stopped next to Maitland and held out his hand. Maitland stepped forward and shook the sheriff's hand. Thanks for coming, Bill. I could have sent someone else. Everyone has plans for Christmas. And Debbie had something at the university, so she won't be home until tonight. And the kids? Well, they're teenagers. You understand? Knight just smiled slightly at him. Yeah, I'll find out someday. Mine are 14, 17, and 20. Not good for family planning. Teenage years last forever. Belker stared at the two men. Jokes about teenagers and the problems of growing up. Sometimes, looking at the ethereal features of the most beautiful woman in the world, sleeping in a drug-induced trance that no kiss could wake her from, he wondered what their children would look like. Would they be dark-haired, stocky, and Eastern European like him, or light-haired, fair-skinned, and lithe like their mother? He would never know. Finally, he forced himself to face the truth. There would be no children. Ever. The sheriff looked at him again, but said nothing. Then he left. Maitland leaned back in his chair. You're free to go, Officer Belker. I know this was a truly awful way to spend Christmas Eve, a terrible 8 months. I wish there was something I could do, but I don't have any money, and I really don't know anyone I could call. A truly terrible 8 months, Mr. Maitland. But Maitland looked at him curiously. I know 2 people died, and the bank lost 100,000, but I don't regret saving his life. The depositors. He's a thief, but he didn't deserve to be executed. No one deserves that kind of death. Maitland stood up. He looked at Belker, then said, What are you going to do when you get out of here? Go to Marcy? Yes, after all, I see her every day. Every day. But today I'll go home, take a shower, get something to eat, and then go to the hospital to see her. I have no family. My parents are dead. So she and I are all alone. I won't abandon her. Not before Christmas. I have a better idea. I'll take you home, you can take a shower, and then you can follow me. We'll spend Christmas Eve with my wife's parents, Roy and Katie Bascom. Spend the evening with us, have dinner, and then you can go to Marcy's. I can't. Christmas is a time to be with your family. I shouldn't come. You don't need my problems. Please, I can't help you with your problems, but no one should be so lonely on Christmas Eve. I'll feel better if you come. Just for a few hours. At 7 o'clock in the evening, he followed Maitland's Escalade into a residential neighborhood and finally turned onto a circular driveway leading to a 2-story brick house. Metal reindeer frolicked in a forest of wire Christmas trees, and a cheerful red, green, and blue message flashed on the house. Merry Christmas, and Happy 2005. He got out of the patrol car and followed Maitland to the front door. Before they reached the porch, the door opened, and a blonde woman in a green dress and an apron covered with white powder, looking like the heroine of a Betty Crocker commercial, came out. She walked up to Maitland and hugged him. Bill, I'm glad you made it. Roy and I almost had to sit on these 2 to keep them from leaving with their friends. We're not the most popular grandparents in the world right now. You did the right thing. Deb should be here soon. I couldn't get a hold of her, but you know she turns off her cell phone in situations like this. A glance flashed between them, and for a moment, Belcari felt like he had intruded on a private conversation. You know she has to. It's university policy. She'll be here soon. Kathy Bascom reached out to touch his hand in a strange maternal gesture and said, Oh, well, I'm just glad you're both here, and that you insisted that BJ and Kelly at least have dinner with us. Debbie's in college and you were in court. That's old news. Someday. She stopped mid-sentence and bit her tongue to keep from saying something she didn't mean. Maitland turned to Belker. On Christmas Eve, we have a Christmas dinner, usually with Katie and Roy. Our kids, BJ is 13 and Kelly is 17, will run off with all their presents like wild horses as soon as they open them tomorrow morning. When they reach a certain age, all their presents become expensive, and they'll be happy. He looked at Katie again. "Katie, this is George Belker." He held out his hand to her, but she waved it away and hugged him. She was a tall woman, about 5 feet 8 inches, sturdy but not fat. When she pulled him close, he felt the softness of her large breasts and felt both embarrassed and aroused. My God, she's a grandmother. But it's been 8 months. "Officer Belker," Bill called and told me what happened. "I'm so sorry about your wife. I'm so glad you accepted his invitation to come and spend a few hours with us. I'm sure you'll enjoy dinner. Bill says I'm a good cook." Maitland smiled. "You're too good a cook, Kathy, to always ask for compliments. Have you ever turned down an invitation to have dinner at our house?" "You should skip a couple of dinners," she said, but a slight smile took the sting out of her words. "Maybe." Then he turned to Belker, who was secretly trying to adjust his pants to hide his growing problem. "Katie, we're coming in after you." She turned and walked into the house. Belker couldn't help but stare after her. Oh, God. "Wait a minute, then go." His gaze followed the swaying figure of Grandma Betty Crocker. "Don't be embarrassed, Belker. All the women in that family are like that. She taught them." When he could, he entered the door, which smelled of turkey, gravy, and, he could have sworn, apple pie. Rap or some kind of teenage music was coming from somewhere. He felt like a stranger. This wasn't his world. Maybe it had been once, but not now. Coming here had been a mistake. Maitland believed that things would be easier here, but he felt worse than words could express. Maitland turned the corner. "Dinner's ready, but we'll wait a few more minutes for Debbie to get here. Would you like some coffee? Tea? Anything stronger?" "Coffee would be great. Black." He drank his coffee while getting to know Kathy's husband, a tall, balding man who was watching something on a nature channel. A 13-year-old boy named BDJ just waved at him when his father introduced him, and Maitland said that Kelly's daughter would be down for dinner when it was time. After Belker finished his coffee, he told Maitland he wanted to go outside and get some fresh air. He had been cooped up inside all day. It was already dark, and Christmas lights illuminated the yard. Looking down the middle-class street, he saw yards decorated with Santa Clauses, elves, reindeer, and garlands of colorful lights. His breath froze as he inhaled and exhaled. The thought came to him without his will or control. He got into the red 2000 Saturn she jokingly called the last survivor of her bachelorette days. They just drove around Riverside, looking at the neighborhoods that competed for the most elaborate Christmas decorations. When they parked on a side street, he leaned back in the passenger seat and said, "Now you're going to tell me you're out of gas and want to have some fun, right? In your dreams, cowboy. First you have to buy me wine and dinner." He took a 16-ounce can of Pepsi from the cup holder, then a huge pack of Slim Jims. "Will this do?" "Sure," she said with a smile that haunted him in his dreams when she slipped into his arms. It was their last Christmas. He stepped out of the past when a car pulled into the driveway. In the darkness, it was a small sports car. When the car stopped in front of the front door, he saw in the light of the Christmas decorations that it was a red 2-seater Audi, what his friends and the lonely cops at the local police station called the car with the girls. He had never had enough money for a car like that, but he had a few friends who did. And they really did attract women like magnets. Something about the power under the hood or the wealth they symbolized. He had never owned a new car in his life. He stood to the side, in the shadows, so that the people in the car couldn't see him unless they looked specifically for him. The woman in the passenger seat was talking about something, then laughed. She opened the door and stuck her long legs out in a short skirt, then leaned forward to get out. He didn't need to introduce himself to know who she was. She was his mother's daughter, but even more beautiful. Maitland was lucky. The driver said something and pulled her by the shoulder. Belker only managed to catch a glimpse of his dark hair and youth. She leaned over and casually touched his lips, then slipped out of the car. "Are you going to a party?" "Yes. I have nowhere else to go. I don't have any family there. But it should be fun. You'll have a nice evening with your family and a fun Christmas." "You too, Doug. And if we don't see each other before then, Happy New Year. Just don't get drunk and do anything you won't remember or regret." "You too." She turned toward the house, and an expression flashed across her face that he couldn't quite place. "This isn't going to happen, Doug. Drive carefully." She was already approaching the door when the Audi pulled away smoothly. She saw him and stopped. "You must be Mrs. Maitland. I didn't mean to scare you. My name is Belker, Patrolman George Belker." "Patrolman? You're not in uniform, so this isn't official. May I ask?" Your husband took pity on me because I'm alone this Christmas and invited me here for a few hours to have dinner with you. I hope I'm not interrupting your family dinner." She gave him a look that was as pleasant as a splinter in the butt, but said, "You've scared me, Officer Belker, but I shouldn't have been surprised. I don't know why you're alone, but you're welcome to share our meal in company. I can't imagine what it's like to be alone on Christmas Eve." The door opened and Maitland came out. They exchanged glances, then Maitland, standing over her on the porch, stepped forward, took her by the chin, and leaned down to kiss her on the lips. For some reason, his lips slipped and touched her cheek. "It was sweet. Very sweet of you to invite Officer Belker to spend Christmas Eve with us, Bill. But I wish you had called and warned me. I would have come home earlier." "You would have come?" She looked at him sternly. "Business is communication and vice versa. We both know that. It was a game, but it's part of the game. You should have been there. You had no reason to go home early. And I didn't call you because your cell phone was off." She turned to Belker. "Anyway, officer, we always have enough food for an army. My mom cooks like it's the end of the world. Dinner's probably ready and everyone's waiting for me. Usually it's my husband who's late or doesn't show up, but this time it's me." "Thank you, Mrs. Maitland. I'll be right in. Just some things. Alone. It helps." She stared at him, and for the first time that evening he believed that she saw him as a man. "Come in when you're ready, officer." She turned to go inside and, passing her husband, bent down to give him a quick hug and stroke his stomach. "And don't eat too much this time, you hear? I want to be an old widow, not a young one. The main thing is that we die together in bed." She just shook her head and walked past him into the house. So they had problems. Maitland told her that they had been married for almost 20 years and had lived together for 2 years before that. It was clear that she had her own life and he had his. There was nothing unusual about that. But they were still married. They still slept in the same bed. He would have given anything to be an old, grumpy couple with Marcy. He quietly opened the door and closed it behind him. He expected them to go into the large dining room, but when he reached the study, he heard their conversation and stopped. "So why am I not surprised, Bill? I come here to spend a few hours with my husband, my children, and my parents, with my family away from work, and you bring home another homeless person. You can't be so cold. I know you don't care about my job or what I do, but this poor guy just killed 2 people. He was kicked off the street, he lost his beloved job, and his wife, with whom he lived for 4 years, is dying in a permanent coma, and he's alone on Christmas Eve. I can't think of a single excuse not to invite him into our home for a few hours. And if you don't like it, then you're a piece of shit. Oh, make me the bitch you always make me. I feel sorry for him. I didn't know any of this, and it's awful. But I believed, I hoped, that one day, just once, we could sit down, eat turkey, and tease our kids. Pretend we were a normal family. Spend the holidays just with us. Not with the ghosts that haunt you, not with the victims of the cases you're trying to solve, not with all the horrible things that most people don't even think about. Maybe that makes me a bitch, but I wanted it to be about us. For a change. There was a long silence, and Belker was trying to decide whether to leave again when he heard, "I don't believe you're a bitch, Deb. Sometimes I get angry with you, but you're still the woman I love. I'd like to give you what you want, but we're not a normal family. I am who I am, and the world is what it is. What do you think? What do you think we could pretend to be a normal family for a few days? Not just for him, but for us. This has gone on too long. I just want us to have a nice Christmas Eve and Christmas, like we used to." "It'll never be like that, Bill. You don't believe it?" "Sometimes." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry. I don't want to be a bitch. Sometimes I don't know where it comes from. I know why you invited him here. It's your nature. That's why I love you even when you drive me crazy." "As long as you love me." "Don't doubt that, Mr. Maitland. I never doubted it." An hour later, Belker made the "no masks" gesture to Katie Bascom when she tried to put more turkey stuffed with oysters, candied sweet potatoes, stuffed mushrooms, and cranberry sauce on his plate. "My stomach is about to explode, Mrs. Bascom. Please, stop. Everything was delicious." Roy Bascom, sitting at the head of the table, laughed and said, "Not only is she the sexiest grandmother in the neighborhood, she's also the best cook." Kathy Bascom smiled at her husband and said, "I don't know if that's true, but I haven't heard a single complaint about either." The teenager everyone called BJ rolled his eyes and said, "Oh God, Grandma, go to your rooms or something." His sister, who had finally come downstairs and was picking at her plate, clearly wanting to leave so she could return to what she had been told was a non-stop marathon of phone calls with at least 2 guys, just looked at him, clearly wondering if they could be related. Belcary almost felt sorry for the Maitlands. It was going to be hell. He was happily married and loved Marcy with all his heart, but this teenage brunette could seduce a stone statue. Roy Bascom laughed and said to his grandson, "You'll be lucky if you find a good girl who's even half the woman your grandmother is." Debbie Bascom joined in the laughter and said, "I don't want to agree with BJ, but guys, you guys should leave." "You're embarrassing our guest." "No," Belker caught himself. "Two people who care about each other after a long time. There's nothing shameful about that. I wish I could." He moved away from the table. "Thank you for dinner, Mr. and Mrs. Bascom, and for the invitation, Mr. and Mrs. Maitland, but I have to go. I have things to do, and I have to see Marcy." Kathy Bascom put her hand on his shoulder to keep him from getting up. "At least, Officer Belker, stay and try my homemade Dutch apple pie. 1 slice and some coffee, and we'll let you go. A few minutes won't kill you." So, after drinking 2 cups of coffee and eating 2 slices of Dutch apple pie, he finally moved away from the table and said goodbye. Kelly Maitland had already disappeared, followed by her younger brother. "Thanks again, Mr. and Mrs. Bascom. You made this Christmas Eve wonderful. Thank you." Katie Bascom made a move to approach him, but he slipped out of her embrace. "I hope everything works out for you, officer," she said with a slight smile. For a moment, he wondered if she was as naive and innocent as she seemed. A woman couldn't look like that, be that age, and not know the effect she had on men. The Lord works in mysterious ways. I truly believe that. I'm a Christian, and I believe there's always hope. I'll pray for a miracle for your Marcy." Roy Bascom simply shook his hand and said, "Good luck, officer." Katie Bascom said, "I'll call Bill and Debbie." But Belker shook his head and said, "I'll say goodbye when I leave. Merry Christmas." They returned to the living room, and he heard them again before he saw them. Why not? The Hunters have all the money in the world, and Gail is your friend. She runs the place. $500,000 is pocket change to them. All you have to do is ask. You've never asked her for anything in all the years she's worked at that bank and since. She's my friend precisely because I've never asked her for anything, Bill. You have no idea what it's like to be that rich. Everyone always wants something. That's why she married her first husband. Because he never wanted anything from her, never asked her for anything, never cared about her money. And look how that turned out. She cheated on him, left him, almost killed him, and just walked away. She had her reasons. They always do. I'm not asking you to ask her to help Belker because she's a wonderful woman. I believe she's a lying, heartless bitch, but she's rich, and she's your friend. I can't, Bill. I'm sorry, I just can't. Do you remember when I was in the hospital? If it hadn't been for the kindness and mercy of a stranger, I might never have gotten out of there. We wouldn't be here, and neither would Kelly and BJ. You're doing the right thing, Debbie, but I know what I would have done if she were my friend. Belker waited a few moments, then stepped forward loudly enough for them to hear him. Mr. Maitland, I'm leaving. Mrs. Maitland, thank you for letting me spend Christmas Eve with you. I'll never forget it. He left without waiting for their reply. It was almost 9 p.m., and he could have driven straight to the hospital to see Marcy, but he wasn't in a hurry. Not until late at night, and he wanted to look back one last time. So he drove through the deserted night streets of Jacksonville, from Riverwalk to the courthouse, from the police station to Arlington, and from Arlington to Jacksonville Beach. He parked his car at the beach entrance and stepped onto the soft sand. He was probably the only living person in the world. All around him was the night sky, a thin crescent moon, and waves rolling in from the ocean. As he walked away, it seemed to me that he was saying goodbye. He held Marcy's small hand in his, thinking about the events of the last few days. Now she knew what had happened, and she would understand. I felt tired and couldn't think clearly. But as long as I held that boy's hand, everything became clear. It's all a lie. Christmas, miracles, happiness. None of it exists. I couldn't afford $1 million to bring this specialist from London, and I never will. And one day, very soon, after a long time of suffering, you're going to die. Shaking and feeling like a weak old man, he took the Glock from her bed with his right hand and, freeing his left hand from hers, brushed the hair away from her face. I won't let you go alone, Marcy. I'll go with you, and we'll be together again. God, how I've missed you. Officer Belker! Liz's slender body stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the light from the hallway. Something glistened on her cheeks, and he realized she was crying too. It's a miracle. The chief surgeon said that Dr. Walensky called a few minutes ago from London. Someone, they don't know who, paid for his entire surgical team to fly here next week. Walensky's experimental surgery might not save Marcy, but it gave her a chance. Who could have found that kind of money? 8 months of begging and fundraising had raised no more than $250,000 for the operation. The phone by the bed rang. He shoved the Glock into its holster and picked up the receiver. I'm calling from a payphone in the lobby. You won't be able to catch me until I'm out of here. From the first words, he knew who was calling. Why? You saved my life. They were going to kill me. I owe you big time. I met a friend of mine who can work miracles with computers. We checked some things out and found out about your wife and Dr. Walensky in London. The problem was that I could only raise $500,000. But it's better than nothing. I arranged for the money to be transferred on the last day of the year. And then my friend told me that an hour ago, a deposit of $500,000 was made into your Marcy Fund account. Who the hell can find $500,000 on Christmas Eve when all the banks are closed? He didn't even realize what he had said until he heard his own voice. Gail Hunt. How do you... Yes, Gale Hunt from the Hunt Bank clan. I don't know how you know them, but anyway, I had to spend all my savings to pay my share for that English doctor, but I'll make it up next year. Banks always come first. Who knows, maybe Miss Hunt will reimburse me for some of my losses. If I tell anyone where this money came from, your money? How would you prove it? The money is clean and anonymous. The doctor has been paid and has no intention of returning his fees. Relax, Officer Belker. It's Christmas, a time for giving and receiving. After a moment of silence, the night depositor added, Merry Christmas, Officer Belker. I hope your wife gets well. There was silence again, and then he heard his own voice. Thank you. He knew he wasn't just thanking a grateful thief, a compassionate prosecutor, a woman who remembered what mercy was, and a woman who might have been a lying, heartless bitch, but hadn't forgotten what friendship was. He wanted to laugh and cry. He limited himself to kissing Marcy's hand, lifting Liz into his arms, hugging her, and kissing her on the forehead. He knew Marcy wouldn't mind. Liz smiled at him through her tears. It really is a miracle, isn't it? Now he could laugh, and he did, stopping only to say, Oh yes, more than you'll ever know.